Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. A huge welcome to Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer. My name is Rich Steve Beck. I'm the founder of this community. Feel free to come hang if you're watching us on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer. And if you're watching on YouTube and want to come hang out with us on Facebook, it's facebook.com/groups/Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer. So we've got a fantastic guest coming up next, a gentleman called Rich Aitken. So Rich is very much from the score mixing world. He's worked on many projects such as film. He's also worked on TV and also video games as well. So without further ado, Rich, how you doing?
Hi.
Good to see you. How's your week? I'm really good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Got myself a nice cup of tea, so that'll do.
Oh, good man. Fantastic. We're looking forward to having a chat with you today about your background in the scoring mixing world. And so maybe let's begin, however, at the very beginning, like we've done with a lot of our guests so far. So at the very beginning as a kid, what type of music were you listening to when you were growing up initially?
I kind of think it was everything my dad would play, really, or my mum. The first record I can remember is a track called Snowflake by Jim Reeves.
Oh, right, okay.
Which is really, that's ancient. But it was growing up listening to the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin. My dad was into all that kind of stuff. But dad was also, still is, into, synth music as well. So he got me into Tangerine Dream and those things. First record I bought myself was probably the Stranglers, though, I think.
Nice.
1978.
Amazing. Absolutely brilliant. So that was the very first one. What about your first instrument? So what was your first instrument that you picked up?
Played drums from the age of 8.
Right.
My brother is Johnny Aitken, who played for years with Spiritualized and things like that. And so we both sort of started playing drums when we were kids. And then as I got older, I thought drums were too big to carry around on a bus. As I left home and moved to Nottingham, so I took up bass guitar. So
incredible.
From 1987 onwards, I was a bass player.
Fantastic. And was that when you first started? I understand you were in a band for a bit as well when you were signed to
I played in bands from the age of about 14. I used to play in working men's clubs. I played in bizarre 50s and 60s covers bands when I was 14 years old with a couple of guys who were in their mid-30s. So we used to play sort of the working men's clubs throughout the 80s. When I left home from my parents' house, I went to live in Nottingham to go to college. I played in various bands up there. Nottingham's a pretty incredible city for the music scene anyway. So I played in quite a few bands up there, and then eventually formed a band with a good friend of mine, Cave Samurai, a band called Narco, and we signed to EMI in about 97, I think it was.
Amazing.
Years ago.
And I think I asked you this question before we went on air, but do you miss those days? Do you miss being in bands and playing live?
Yeah, as I was saying to you, I kind of miss the thought of it, but I don't think my body would put up with it anymore. I'm a 51-year-old man now, so I don't really fancy prancing around the stage and jumping off speaker stacks anymore. But I sort of miss the buzz, I suppose, but not the not the physicality of it.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, I think I mentioned to you before, I'm from Nottingham originally as well, so I know Nottingham very well. Rock City, I'm guessing, did you play at Rock City back in the day? And
many times. Yeah, I met Peter Green in Rock City once as well. That was quite interesting. Yeah, the founder of Fleetwood Mac, just after he came out of his long drug-infused hiatus, he sort of made a comeback in the early 90s and did some blues gigs, and we were playing downstairs in Rock City and he was playing upstairs. So shared a dressing room with him, man. That was quite fun.
That's amazing. That's so cool. So tell us, okay, so you've played obviously in bands for years initially, and then so how did you get into the studio world? So how did all that come about?
Yeah, a lot of that came from, I think it was very different back in the early 90s and late 80s that the only way you could get the sound that was in your head was by spending a lot of money with the right people. There were a lot of demo studios around, and inevitably they came out as demo quality recordings. So there was a frustration about not being able to get the sounds that I wanted. And so, for better or for worse, just wanted to get involved in studio stuff so I could have a go at saying, come on, let's get it as punchy as this band or that band or whatever. And there was a studio in Nottingham in the early 90s called the Square Centre.
Yep.
And it may even still exist, I'm not sure. But I used to hang around there with a guy called Robin Younger, who was an engineer. And actually, funnily enough, a guy who just won one of your competitions, a guy called Guy Elderfield.
Yeah.
Lovely chap. Haven't seen him for 25 years, but his name sprung up on your winners list. I was like, oh, Guy Elderfield. I used to know him. A very talented man, a very talented engineer, and a very good bloke. But I haven't seen him for 26 years, I don't think.
He used to be one of my lecturers. Sorry to interrupt you. He used to be one of my lecturers at college back in 2000 when I did music technology and popular music. So nice.
Yeah. So there we go. It's our 1 degree of separation. That's
Absolutely.
It. We found it already. Well, if you speak to Guy again, say hello from me. I remember him very, very fondly. He was a good guy. I really liked him, and I recorded with him a few times. I sort of learned things from him, even though, he just sort of, because he was in and out of the Square Centre all the time. And
amazing.
And so I just really got involved in that. And then when I moved down to Oxford, and because I'd signed in this band Narco to EMI, I just thought, what's cutting edge? And Pro Tools was cutting edge in late 96, early 97. So I bought Pro Tools, and that got me a lot of work because there wasn't a lot of Pro Tools rigs around then. So because I was on EMI, and I suddenly started getting editing jobs from EMI and production music. So that was how I sort of got into that. And then it was from then onwards, it's a succession of chance meetings, meeting the director of a company called Reflections, who needed some music for a little video game called Driver 2. And, and I had some, and they liked that. And from there onwards, met up with my ex-business partner, Mark Canham, who's a successful composer in his own right now, does some pretty good films and TV shows. And we had a company for nigh on 14 years. So most of our development was done straight out of Narco into a production company.
Wow. That's so cool. And then I understand as well you've got a bit of a background, before we maybe delve into some of your discography and what you've done in the past, that you've also done video game development. Is that right? Is that
I was I've been involved in the music in video games. Well, I'm not so much these days, but for a long time I did it solidly from 2000 to 2013-ish, and worked on the Far Cry franchise, worked on as a producer and mixer on the Killzone franchise. I worked on all the Driver games, God knows how many, SingStar and other things like that. Yeah, just for myself, mostly working in the production side of stuff, and making my network through video games, if you like. And at the time was doing low-end TV stuff as well. It was sort of just progressed in parallel.
Amazing. So that's really interesting. So what I'd really love to know as well, how has score mixing changed since the early days of getting involved with mixing video games and producing video games to where we're at now? I'm guessing it's changed dramatically over the last 20 years or so.
Well, we can look at it in several ways. I used to have a Neve mixing console, 2 Mac Pros, TDM cards in my Mac Pros, tons of outboard gear, and everything would be mixed maybe to 4 stems if you were lucky, but mostly a stereo mix. And the mix I did, it stayed on the console until it was approved. So I might be involved in mixing a whole score for a game, for 5 or 6 weeks. Now I do it all on my laptop. I take my laptop to Abbey Road if I need to, and clients want to be there, or I sit in my studio here. When I have to run stems, I just take my laptop home and run them. I've got an equivalent setup at home with UAD cards and things like that. So, I carry. You're on my laptop now. This is my laptop, and I do all my work on this as well. And it's just incredible. It's the fact that I can actually work long hours, but I can do half of them sitting at home while having a cup of tea, because I can. Once the mix is done in my studio, which has great acoustics, I don't need to hear it so much anymore. I'm just running off stems or just running off edits for people. Now I couldn't have done that even 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. when I started, I was working on tape machines, and I quickly moved to ADAT machines, and then onto an early Pro Tools rig. But what's come with that as well is composers. I work with composers all of the time. Their ability to put together complex and finished sounding music has also increased. It used to be you might get 10 or 12 tracks of stuff from a composer back in 1999, and I might just sort of mix it together on the console, and then they'll come over and do some overdubs in the studio or something like that. But now people are sending me 200 tracks for a 30-second TV spot, and it's
wow.
So it's sort of lots more complicated. People are delivering really, really well produced stuff to folks like me, and then we're sort of doing a logistics exercise, and we've got to get things down into a shape that will go to TV or to film or onto the game in an efficient and time sensitive manner. You've got to do things quicker, faster, and bigger than ever before at the moment. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Maybe talk us through it a little bit, Rich, but how does score mixing, excuse me, differ from, say, mixing a band? As you said, it's like, it's 200 channels that you've got. So how do you prepare for such an epic project like that? And how does it differ from maybe, I don't know, a 60-track band mix, for example?
The major difference, and you'll hear this from me, from Jake Jackson, from all the way up to Alan Meyerson and people like that, is we're not really putting anything on the mix bus. That's the major difference. So everything we're doing is going to be into our sub buses, into our percussion bus, cymbals bus, strings bus, brass bus, bass guitar bus, if you like, whatever. It's all going to be all the mojo is going to happen there. So we're not doing things like mixing into a compressor for a couple of reasons. One is the stems we need to make a lot of stems for film work and TV work, and they have to add up exactly. They can't be roughly right, because when they suddenly decide, we can't use the mix because we need to turn this violin down because it's just when somebody's saying something really important, they can't just suddenly open up the stems and it doesn't sound the same. It has to sound exactly the same. So my stems phase cancel with my mix, and as do most people's involved in the sort of film world and TV world. So that's the main difference. Generally, I'm mixing in 5.1 or 7.1.4 beds for Atmos. And I'll fold those down to stereo. What I won't do is upmix stereo into surround, because I think it sounds trashy. But I will fold it down, because it actually folds down pretty well, especially 5.1. 5.1 folds down very nicely to stereo. And then how do you approach it? How do you deal with 100, 200, 300 channels? Lots of organization. I think everyone does this now, but I've been doing it for sort of nearly 17 years since color coding first came into Pro Tools. It's just making sure that you've got your percussions all one set of colors, and your strings are another set, and your brass or whatever, or your synths, and they're all color coded. I get VCAs onto those groups very early. I get VCAs across groups. So if you have lead instruments, like you might have a lead brass instrument, a lead string instrument, and 3 lead synths, they'll be onto a VCA lead fader, so that I can control those across the stem groups as well as within the stem groups. And then I will bounce out live, 20 stems of 5.1 or 7.1.4, and I'll bounce down a stereo reference and a 5.1 reference and a stereo reference with a limiter on it to get it up to loud producer-like volume that people will accept, I mean, that's the other thing. We're mixing. I mix with the dialogue up all of the time, so I tend to mix quite naturally at cinema levels or at TV levels. Most of the dub people who work with me won't really have to turn my music down or up, because it'll tend to be right. So what they'll be doing is just detailing it rather than going, that's 20 dB too loud or 20 dB too quiet. I tend to mix it the volume that my composers want it to be in the film, and then I deliver that. Then it's a phone call to dub to make sure that I've got all the things that they've got all the things that they need from me. Whereas when you mix a band, as you know, the stereo mix is the final product, and that's a little bit different.
Absolutely. It's excuse me, really interesting that you've pointed that one out. So with mixing strings, for example, I'm sure you've heard the huge difference now between a live, I don't know, string quartet or an orchestra versus samples and MIDI and what you can actually achieve now on a laptop. So
Yeah.
do you reckon that it's almost there? Does it still have the same feel, do you think? Or is it very different, would you say? Have both got benefits, would you say?
Yeah, they've definitely both got benefits. Do I think that sampled stuff sounds good? Damn right, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Does it sound like an orchestra? No. Does it sound close enough to an orchestra? Yes. But it doesn't sound like an orchestra, no way. You'll use it, for example, a string patch of violins, 18 violins will sound a certain kind of way. That's great. So it will sound like 18 violins.
Yeah.
But 18 violins without the cello and bass playing at the same time don't sound the same. So the 18 violins playing an ostinato with, the rest of the string section sounds different to the 18 violins doing it on their own. It's the same problem as doing partial recording as well. I've done quite a lot of, I'll record the viola, cello and bass at the same time, and then the violins separately, and then the brass separately, and then the winds separately. And it sounds good, but there's depth and resonance issues that are different to if you record them at the same time. And I have a few theories as to why that is, but some of it's just actual intonation things, because people, when they're playing together, they naturally intonate together a lot, very, very well, rather than through one, because they're all wearing Nelson headphones. They've got one ear in and one ear out to listen to their instrument. So that's a different experience. Listening to the cello while you're playing violin, and it's right in your ear, but actually normally you're used to the cello being 26 feet away from you. So that's slightly different. How a microphone responds to a whole broadband array of sound coming at it rather than just violins is different again. The harmonic relationships of those microphones is different. The reverberation characteristics is different. The partial cancellations from harmonics in a room is different. So if you can't get partial recordings to sound the same as a full orchestra, the step further, you definitely can't get samples to sound exactly the same as a full orchestra. But do they sound good? Of course they sound good. They sound cracking. I've heard great scores done on samples, fantastic pieces of work. There's a guy called Jamie Salisbury who does absolutely incredible work with his samples. And I listen to it and go, this absolutely blows me away. And there's a chap online, is it Graham Plowman? He does these fantastic demos.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think it's Graham Plowman. I hope I've got his name right, because I'd hate to be wrong. But his demo, he says, I've done this Star Wars demo. And it's like, that sounds great. Well done. Sounds fantastic. It's a little bit like, it's like drums, isn't it? The first one of these discussions was drum machines versus drummers. And people going, are drum machines as good as drummers? They don't really know what that means. Drum machines are great. Drummers are great. They're different things. You can make them do fairly similar things. You can make them fulfill exactly the same roles. So your sample orchestra fulfills exactly the same role as your live orchestra and sounds great and exciting and does exactly what it's supposed to do. But is it identical? No, it's not. One of the things I notice a great deal is trumpets in particular. If you ever listen to any sort of John Williams score, who's a heavy trumpet user, that trumpet, when it's playing the big Star Wars melody or Raiders of the Lost Ark melody, will be searingly loud, but it won't be too much. You try getting the samples the same loudness, it'll blow your head off. But then the converse is true. The tight ostinatos and chuggings that you might do with samples, you try getting an orchestra to do that without tearing your hair out, as you can see.
I'm there as well. Don't worry.
Yeah. So both brilliant, but not the same. Not the same.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I've been a guitarist, just for fun. As you know, like mastering's my main gig. But I've been playing guitar for 25 years, and I've obviously tried all these different amp sims, and I do like them. They sound great, but as you know, they don't sound quite the same as, an actual Marshall stack or a Mesa boogie or something along those lines. You know, I think the sound is almost there. But at what an age, though, that we live in, Rich. It's crazy the fact that you can now basically get like a whole band together on your laptop and it can just be you that creates it. It's amazing.
And it sounds great and it sounds good. It doesn't have to. It doesn't sound the same as doing it the other way, but it doesn't have to. And it's close enough that everyone who's listened to it goes, yeah, that's a band. It's only when you get into that minute, that minute sort of bits of details that you go, that's not real. But it doesn't need to be real. It's still good, And a lot of records I listen to now, I think they sound good. I've got quite a eclectic taste in music. I listen to a lot of stuff my kids listen to, and I go, yeah, that's good. What can you say? What can you say other than it's really good?
Absolutely. With Hot Topic, Dolby Atmos at the minute. So Apple's obviously released their new new way that they deliver music. So what are your thoughts, and do you think that it's going to revolutionize the way that we mix and we master music as engineers? Do you think it's going to revolutionize the way the listeners listen to the music as well? Do you think the general public will adapt well to it, or do you reckon it's going to be a fad and it's going to disappear, or what are your thoughts? I know that obviously you do a lot of surround mixing, but is the general public ready for that yet?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because what I think is I think the public will be largely will be shielded from the reality of what these things actually mean. They'll just still enjoy music, but what doing object-oriented mixing rather than just making beds, having a full Atmos object-based system, is you're sort of future-proofing yourself to different versions in the future. I can make a 5.1 mix out of a full Atmos mix. I can make a 7.1. I can make a stereo because I've got, either the beds or the objects there targeted and available to do things. It allows a recording or a mix to be not completely future-proof, because I'm sure somebody will come up with something else in the future, but probably in a long time. But it gives you this extensibility of having a format that you can do a lot more with. You can do virtual remixing. You can retarget for environments. I mean, that's part of the objective of an Atmos system anyway, is that it's largely speaker agnostic in terms of number of speakers, and it's about objects being mapped to an environment. So if your Atmos environment has 10 speakers, your 128 object Atmos mix is mapped to these speakers in various ways. Where that works in things like Apple Music doing it is you've got, essentially, you can either have an immersive head tracking mix if you want to, but I don't think that's really its big advantage. The main thing is that it's a future-proof format that you've then got, you've got control of. Well, if you mix it in a certain way, you've got your end product, but you've also got the ability to pull things apart in artistic ways, taking the vocal out because it's there in the format. Whereas trying to take the vocals out of Rolling Stones records, people have been trying to do that for 20, 30 years, and you sort of do it with a bit of phase cancellation, and you still got this reverb on the left-hand side, and the kick drums disappeared as well. Well, object formats sort of mitigate that somewhat. It's a little bit like where filmmaking is, well, especially with virtual reality. This is the audio equivalent of virtual reality, isn't it? It's objects simulated in space such that your viewpoint can change. And it's about affording a mechanism where art now has a huge new space in which it can explore. Does that change the user's enjoyment? I don't know. It depends what people present to them. I'm pretty sure a Blink 182 record is a Blink 182 record, and that's how it is,
Yeah, sure.
Surround didn't redefine cinema. It just made it a bit cooler, So I guess it's more about what you can do with it in the future than what does it mean right now to be able to put on and listen to a Kendrick Lamar record in Atmos. What does that mean? I don't think it means that much. I think it means it's a great record to listen to. But does it change your user experience? A little bit, probably, if it's got head tracking stuff on it. But where that goes in the future, for example, for film syncs, it's very, very simple to be able to say, we're going to use the version that's this, and this. If you do it right, it's possibly that stems become irrelevant.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just a bigger format, more open. It's a stage back from the fully rendered complete mix. It's a set of instructions to say this is how to put the mix together. And I'm sure over the years that will develop to compression models, EQ models, and reverb models. That in the end, what it will be is, as a mixer, you're informing you're making a protocol about how this thing should be played, and then your back end device will go, yes, we will play it like that, but we don't do that, and that you've provided, but we'll do these other things instead. So, yeah, I think it's brilliant, but it doesn't change the immediate thing, but it does open up a realm of possibilities, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I was thinking about, that's so great. Thanks for that, Rich. I was thinking about maybe, like a university kid, an 18-year-old, they're maybe just heading to, I don't know, just like some music university to start learning about music production and how to mix. But they're not going to have the budget to be able to do that style of mixing, because they're working on headphones with a laptop and, I don't know, like a Focusrite or something like that. So it must be really hard for them to get into that world as well, because they've not got the budget to be able to do that. But however, I think you've mentioned about waves. You mentioned about with the headphones. So tell us more about what you've been doing with that.
Yeah, I had an Ambisonics gig earlier this year, and they wanted to do some. It was for I can't mention what it is because it's still under wraps. But it's for it's for a mobile phone product with head tracking, and the only way to mix stuff that's going to be presented on headphones with head tracking is to wear head tracking headphones. I can't sit with my massive full range speakers and do that unless you want to strap them to your head. And so I bought a couple of the Waves head trackers, and they work really well. They do you can do first order ambisonics in that, and I also did some straight 5.1 surround monitoring in that one. It worked pretty well. It's not excellent, but this is early days for this technology, I thought it was really good. I really liked it. That you've seen quite a few plugins doing the same thing. You see the mix room things coming into fruition for people to use in Logic and Cubase and Pro Tools, whatever, and that's quite interesting. I think environment mapping is a natural extension of any sort of 3D usage anyway. So, being able to build three-dimensional worlds that are in sonic space was a natural next stage thing from doing virtual reality stuff. I did some virtual reality things back in the mid-90s, and it was static sound and 5 frame a second 3D graphics with huge clunky visors and things. But now to be able to use it in that subtle way, let me just sort of go back a step and say that when you're mixing in 5.1, you're not shoving loads of stuff in these two speakers and it's like this overwhelming experience, unless you're mixing Iron Maiden or something, I suppose. What you're doing is enhancing the space to make it blur outside of the speakers. And I think the use of immersive technologies with head tracking is going to be similar. It's not necessarily about going, I'm going to turn my back on the actor and he's now going to be behind me. I think it's more about creating this sense of movement in it, so it feels more real to you. When you get location cues from sound all of the time by how it changes coming into your ear, in the sound appearing in your ears. So if you're moving your head with head tracking stuff and you're getting a similar experience to that, that can only be a nice creative landscape for people populating sound environments to work within. I think I digressed off your question.
No, that's great. That's awesome. Thanks, Rich. That's brilliant. So good. Tell us then. So, what speakers do you currently enjoy using when you're mixing at the moment?
I use. I don't know if I can turn my computer around to show. I think it might be because I've got a plug in there. Sorry, I can't show you.
That's all right. It's cool.
I use some full range SP1Ms by a company called SP Acoustics, which is a custom design speaker company owned by Steve Phillips. And I'll drop you a photo of them sometime.
Yeah,
but
that's brilliant.
They're a bit like ATC SCM150s in terms of sound output. They're a sealed box though. They've got no ports in them. They're about 5.5 foot tall, and they've got four speakers in them and a massive, great big empty space below them. And I've got 3 of them there, and I've got 2 smaller speakers at the back for the 5.1, and then the same two at the side for 7.1. And at the moment, I upmix to 7.1.4, but I'm getting 4 speakers up there over the summer. And as I said, I want to knock this wall down.
Yeah. Which we're not going to do live today, right?
Not today, no. I was thinking about it. What if I've got a big hammer? I'll surprise Rich.
Absolutely, that'd be amazing. Maybe next time. Yeah, Rich, tell us headphones. So, do you rock any headphones at the minute that you enjoy using, or is it just predominantly?
Yeah, I've always I've never liked working on headphones. I think it's really, really hard to pan in headphones. It's quite easy to manage an overall balance, but you tend to get your lead instruments too loud. And I hate EQing in headphones. I think it can be done, but I say that, and I got into some Audi's LCDXs. Yes, I bought LCD ones first of all to see what they're like. Okay. Loved them, thought they were great. So then went LCDX, and the mixes are not the same as doing in here, but what I can do is I can make precise tweaks for people. So if I've done a mix in my room and they've gone back and the client said, we really like it, the strings are sounding a little bit harsh. Instead of me getting in my car and driving 15 miles to my studio, I can, just because I've told you before, I've got 3 UAD boxes at home and I've got 3 UAD boxes here, and I use a lot of acoustical plugins. I can plug into my system at home, put my headphones on, and I've got some Gentle X at home as well, but I can plug it to the headphones and I can just, dial it in a little bit, and I can put things right as a self-referencing. So I can go, yes, that needs to be about 2K less, a couple of dB at 2K less, and I can do that on the headphones. I probably wouldn't want to start a mix on headphones, but I can finish one. And I think that's really all that people are saying, is you can do the second half of your work on headphones. I think starting on headphones is tough. There are people who can do it, but I ain't one of them.
No, absolutely fair enough. Really interesting that you pointed out about Acoustica as well. So what have I used? Ivory. I sometimes use Ivory 4, but what Acoustica plugins are you using, and what general plugins do you like using at the moment? I use Taupe or Torp from Acoustica a lot, which is their tape simulator, tape emulator. And I also use El Rey, which is the Greg Wells sort of inspired compressor. I used to use Lime a lot, but I don't anymore. My main plugin, probably in daily use, is FabFilter Q3.
Yep. That's the one I'm using. That probably gets used on every single channel, let alone every single mix. I don't use as much compression as people who are mixing pop music, although I do if a piece of film score has that kind of pop aesthetic it's looking for. But if I'm using compression, I'm either doing it really tough for an effect, so it's probably a UAD 1176 or something like that, or I'll use the FabFilter C2 for sort of gentle arcing compression, just to hold things in place. And then a ton of reverbs. God, I've got every reverb you can think of. I'm using Seventh Heaven quite a lot these days.
Great plugin.
Yeah, it is. I'm using Paragon from Nugent a lot. Nugent, however you say it, which is their surround reverb. I use Altiverb, as everybody does. Yeah. I use quite a lot of Valhalla. I use a lot of Lexicon PCM stuff. The plates from UAD, the plates from Sound Toys, the plates from Acoustica. I'm a bit of a plate reverb fan.
Amazing.
Yeah, and lots of others. I mean, reverb is the big one for me, I think. Reverb and EQ. And I do a hell of a lot of automation. That's probably what takes the place of my long form dynamics, is I'm automating a lot.
Yeah. Incredible. What about delays as well? Any fun delays that you enjoy using?
Timeless from FabFilter from time to time, and Echo Boy. I probably don't use any more than those. I don't use a lot of delays. I do use a lot of Hass delays, which is not particularly hearable delays, but changing the relationship in time from the left to the right or the front to the back, whatever. I do that quite a lot. So
amazing.
I just use Time Adjuster, which is a sample-based delay. You can just delay things 400 samples or something.
Oh, nice. What about multiband compression? Do you use any multiband compression from time to time?
I generally try and avoid it unless I'm looking for a particular texture out of something. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of multibands. I do use them on snare drums occasionally, and I'll use them on vocals that maybe a couple of areas of the voice are pretty pointy. So I'll, make a narrow multi and just stack on that frequency to pull it down or to squish it. I sometimes use multibands to get a lot more bass out of an instrument that's maybe quite broad sounding. So I'll just be pumping up, 20 dB at the bottom end and then squishing it down with a multiband just to keep that, to give it some solidity. So maybe sometimes a double bass or a bass guitar, if it's meant to provide a really, really solid, almost synth-like texture. I'll do it with synths as well. You might have synths that got a lot of 30 hertz in them or 40 hertz in them, but then there seems to be a big hole. So I'll try and fill that in with a multiband, or I'll distort that through Decapitator or something and then bring that into a multiband. But I don't tend to use them across instrument groups, and I certainly don't use them on a mix bus because I don't really mix that way anymore. I'm a bit of a, as I said before, into stems kind of guy.
Amazing. Do you use any outboard at the minute, or are you predominantly in the box?
Yeah, I've got Shadow Hills sat here, which because I do masters for soundtracks, I exclusively master soundtracks. I don't do any pop music. It's not my realm.
Brilliant.
Got a couple of Bricastes, which I use on live orchestra. I've got a custom-made Watson EQ sat there. Might even just be able to show you that. Will it stretch straight to my? You can just see the edge of my 500 format
flashing.
Stuff. My 500 format stuff. Here, I'll show you my Shadow Hills as well. If I can just, can you get round to the Shadow Hills? Without that, let me take.
This is delicate exercise, Rich.
I've got a bloody short cable in there, so can you? I don't know if Hills. There's the Shadow Hills.
Hey, amazing.
It's up there.
Brilliant.
I've got my two Bricastes at there. There's an EQ behind up there, and I've got I've got two John Watson EQs, and I've just ordered. I've got a massive passive down in my rack down there, which I don't think's been switched on for a year. I sold most of my outboard quite a few years ago, and when I sold my console as well. I used to have an EMT 140 plate that used to get used quite a lot, but they're a bit impractical for recall. So the only time I use outboard is if I'm going to process something and record it back in, or on a master. I certainly won't mix with live outboard anymore because I'm switching between queues and projects all of the time, which is chaotic.
Amazing. Really? I think we're back, Rich.
Yeah, I'm back. I think we got a bit stuttery there, didn't we?
We did a little bit, but we're live, so it's fine. It's cool.
It's me. It was me moving my laptop. I'm telling you, I shouldn't have done it.
Probably. So really interesting that you mentioned about mastering as well. So when you're doing a client's master, and I know that this is another hot topic at the minute with LUFS at the moment, and obviously Spotify, wants us all to aim for like 14 LUFS. What range do you usually go for? Are you mastering a little bit hotter than that, or round about that range?
Hotter. Definitely hotter, always hotter. I mean, mostly as you will do. I mean, you master a broader array of stuff than I do. I particularly only master soundtracks, but I'll mix it to as loud as I think is right. I prefer Spotify, etc., to turn me down rather than turn up and apply their crappy limiter. So I'd rather go. I don't aim for -12, but I'm quite happy if it sits at -12 or -13 or -13.9, whatever. But I don't particularly aim. I mean, I've done soundtracks which have been really delicate string pieces, and there's one bit that peaks up at -1 because of a massive hit, and then the rest of it's sitting down at -20. I know that's fine. Just I don't think the soundtrack world in the same way plays anything like the loudness wars. I'm not trying to make a loud kick-ass record. I'm trying to make a record that reminds you of an emotive experience, and often acts as a calling card for a composer anyway. So it's not quite the same thing as doing pop or rock or dance music or anything like that. But I won't aim for it, but I do, I just do it so it sounds. I keep my monitors calibrated to a level. I work on the old sort of K scale a little bit, or as well, and just set my my gain control on my on that.
Yep.
And then just and don't touch it. Then just do everything by ear, and just make it work that way. And because I only use 3 gain positions on my volume control. One is sort of my master's position. One is my film position, and one is my TV position. And I've got another one as well for online stuff, as in YouTube films or something. Yeah. And I'll just do it by ear from that, so that I've got a calibrated gain work set up there, and then just do it by ear. If it wants to be loud, I'll make it loud. If it wants to be quiet, I'll let it be quiet.
Fantastic.
Which I think is a nicer way to work.
Yeah.
I think everyone would be really happy if they could work that way, with that kind of like, look, I don't want to go into their 20 dB headroom. I just want to punch around,
That's great. Nice. Yeah, play around with dynamics and see where it takes you as well. Because I suppose.
I'm not opposed to loud music though. If someone wants to make something smash up at -7 lufs, that's totally cool. Especially if it sounds good there. I'm all right with that.
Yeah. Same here. Absolutely agree with you. Couldn't agree more. Before we go, Rich, then in a couple of minutes, I'd love to maybe just explore in a couple of projects that you've worked on. So for me, I'm a gamer, as a lot of people in our community are. Horizon Zero Dawn. Tell us about that project and how that came about.
I've known Joris de Man years. We worked. He was the composer on Killzone, and the team behind that got me involved in recording some live orchestra. That was great. And Joris is just, he just sort of favored. He does a lot of mixing himself, and he's a very good mixer himself. He's one of the rare breed. He's a composer that mixes really well. He's got a certain style, and he likes it to work that way, and he does it very, very well. He gets me involved on the more live end of things, or when he's looking for something that he maybe is not so comfortable with. So I've mixed, it was just really coming out of a relationship, really, as most things are. It's he trusted me. I didn't mess with his sound. I think it comes down a little bit to my philosophy on mixing anyway, which is 20 years ago, my philosophy was take something that's ropey sounding and make it good. Now it's take something that's good and just make it translatable. So I think the way you mix now as a mixer you don't undo what your client's done. So I'm not undoing what Joris does. I'm sort of listening to what he's done and going, that's great, but there's a bit of resonance there. And I think what he was trying to do was this. So it's a lot about adding 20% rather than replacing the whole thing. So yes, Horizon Zero Dawn was relationship with the guys at Guerrilla Games, a little bit with he's no longer at Sony SCEE anymore. I can't remember his name. Who's the music guy there? I can't remember his name now. That's terrible. I've forgotten his name. It's going to name check him. Anyway, just working with Joris for years on other projects. So I think it was who he wanted to work with. So that's why I worked on that.
Incredible. So cool. Thanks for that, Rich. Tell us about the film you worked on, I Care a Lot, as well. So tell us about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long-term relationship with Mark Canham and a director he works with quite a lot called Jay Blakeson. Very talented director, just unbelievable storyteller. And that came out of working on a couple of earlier projects, the earliest of which will be The Disappearance of Alice Creed. And Jay wanted Mark to make a particularly angular and over-bright electronic score, which in much the same way as the film gets darker and darker, so does the sonics of the music get darker and more reverberant. So we start quite spiky in a sort of Mark Mothersbaugh kind of way, but we end up in almost a Steve Reichian kind of quite heavy sort of output kind of way, but with electronics, or Trent Reznor kind of vibe, But yeah, that's my long-term relationship with Mark Canham. I've mixed most of his work for the past 20 years. So and long may he continue. But yeah, that was an interesting project. We mixed that in Abbey Road. It was the first gig I mixed on my laptop in Abbey Road. So I turned up with my laptop and said to the guys at Abbey Road, I'm using my laptop, not your Mac. And they went, what? We don't even know how to plug that in. And I said, okay, I've got a dock. Here's the wires. Plug it in. Yeah. I need your room, and I want to use my laptop because I need to be able to take it exactly working back to base and run the stems. I can't risk it, not working exactly the same way. And I think that's going to be my modus operandi really for the future, is doing a lion's share of work at my gaff here, and then running off to Ayr or Abbey Road or whatever other place, and even going into dub, which I've done that a couple of times. I've been into dub with the live mixes, and we've changed a couple of things because they were difficult mixes. I care a lot. Interesting thing, it's the one time I did mix with something on the mix bus, and it was a multiband. So I've just told you how I never mix with anything on the mix bus, and I hate multibands. And it's exactly what I did on those two. And what I did so that they had full control of the stems and the stems didn't change is I spoke to the post-production guys, and I gave them my Pro Tools session with the multiband, the limiter live. Right. And they changed it all live, and they had the multiband and the limiter live on the mix bus. So I had the stems pre-mix bus, and then left those two things on the mix bus for them. So if they change things, it would change organically, rather than you've suddenly got a string section going because there's a drum running all the way through on your multiband.
That's really interesting.
So yes, I lied to you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. That's brilliant. A couple more. So Holby City as well. So tell us about working with the guys at Holby City.
That's recent. I've been on Casualty for about 3 years, and just recently started working on Holby City. So
brilliant.
That's quite good. I've been working on Silent Witness a few years ago, a couple of years back. Worked with Nick Walker on Silent Witness. That was good fun as well. Yeah, it's a good one.
Brilliant. Some of the video games as well, so the old school video games like Driver and Far Cry 2. So tell us about a couple of those projects.
Well, Far Cry 2 was, they wanted Mark as a composer, and I think he was ahead of the game really then. Everyone else was doing massive, huge sounding scores, and Mark said, well, we're going to do a string quartet with 2 percussionists and some North African singers. And back in, whenever Far Cry 2 was, I think it was 2007 or something, that was like, what are you going to do that for? That sounds a bit too arty for video games. Well, no, it wasn't. You can do arty stuff in video games. And that's what he did. It came out really good. We did a lot of research into various rhythms as you move around Africa. There's lots of different ways of playing percussion and things. We worked with Baba Mal, the Senegalese singer. We recorded one of the pieces of music. We recorded a tribe actually out in a village they were doing some singing. And they were doing dancing as well, so you can actually hear the stamping of the feet. We were all recorded on a B format microphone, so it has actually in surround. Driver, Alistair Brimble started Driver 1, and then we did all the drivers from. Alistair did some stuff on Driver 2, we did some stuff on Driver 2, and then Driver 3, Driver Parallel Lines, Driver San Francisco. Those were the big ones that we did, and we spent a lot of Ubisoft's money on those gigs because the license we did all the licensing as well. The licensing bills were pretty huge. We were working with major stars for doing guest appearances on Driver 3, so we had Iggy Pop, we were working with the Ravenettes, we were working with the Teddy Bears. Those are great days.
Amazing.
That's a long time ago for me now.
Oh, really cool. Thanks so much for that, Rich. Before you go then, so you mentioned about knocking through your back wall and building more speakers. But what's next in your world? What's your plans for the future?
I occupy an interesting position in the music world. I'm very fiercely freelance. I'm not attached to any particular studio. I've been doing it 27 years now. And I work on... a lot of people out there have aspirations to work on, film and TV shows and things like that. I think what I work on is what 99% of people will end up working on. Very few people get to work on Star Wars or a Chris Nolan film. Those are big projects. That's the big money gigs are up there. I tend to work on a lot of independent films. I work on a lot of TV shows. I work on a lot of documentaries. I work on, lots of adverts and things. I work on, I think, what I consider to be where most of the work is, if not most of the individual money. And I think I sort of feel that there's maybe a bit of a space for sort of learning materials about that stuff. How do you pull a TV show mixed together in a day and a half rather than 3 weeks, and, maybe showing some examples from my history, if you like. So I think that's the next thing I'm going to do. maybe over the next year. I've got a new assistant who's helping me put some of that stuff together at the moment, and then we're increasingly getting involved in full dubs here as well.
Nice.
We've got a crappy projector at the moment, so the next thing is buy a decent projector, knock that wall down, make a big 9-meter long room, and full Atmos, and just get involved in the lower budget end of full dubs for film. We already do it for adverts anyway. I've done loads of adverts for Gaultier and Pepsi Cola and all kinds of stuff really. So we're just moving into TV shows and film. I think it's a natural progression. I've been in the business a long time, so getting involved in the dubbing end of stuff is where we're going. In fact, I've just done a film recently where we're not finished it yet. We've been involved in track laying, all of the sound design, and sorting out all the dialogue and preparing for the final mix. So yeah, all that kind of stuff really. Mixing stuff, innit?
Absolutely. Absolutely incredible. Oh, Rich, no, thank you so much for your time today, mate. It's been absolutely brilliant. So really appreciate it. I know you're a very, very busy man, and every time I message you, you're always deep into a project and deep into a mix.
I seem to be eternally apologising to you, Rich.
It's fine. No, it's so good. Rich, so thanks a lot for your time again today, sir. It's been absolutely brilliant. Feel free to hang out just after we finish the live as well, before you go as well. But anyone watching, again, feel free to join our community, which Rich is on as well, which is Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer, which is facebook.com/groups/produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer. You'll find amateurs on there, intermediates and pros like Rich as well, all hanging out and chatting away about the wonderful world of music. But Rich, again, thanks for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. It's, as I say, you're doing a great thing.
Thank you.
I follow your posts avidly. I think you're doing a fantastic thing, and people should be following you.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it. That means so much. Thanks, Rich. Cheers. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining. We're just going to leave the live.